Hello there. Please, sit with me for a moment. I am Miranda, and this year I am 70 years old. In those 70 years, there is a story I have kept hidden, a story that began the very moment I was born. It was a full moon night in 1955. That night, I wasn't just born. I unintentionally became a curse upon my entire family. My father left the moment he laid eyes on me. And that is a truth it has taken me a lifetime to face. Today, I am going to tell you everything. But before I begin this journey into my memories, I truly want to know who is sitting here listening to me. Where are you in this world? My story is a long and, at times, very lonely journey. So, please leave a comment to let me know where you're from. Just so I know that in this heart-to-heart, I am not alone. And neither are you. I was born in the countryside, in a tall wooden house, one of those built on cedar posts, raised high off the ground. Under the house grew tall weeds, poison ivy, and there lived brown recluse spiders and copperheads. We couldn't play down there at all. The house had 4 small rooms, hardwood floors that creaked when someone walked, a tin roof that heated up like an oven in summer. In the back was an addition where the wood-burning stove sat and a rough little table for us to eat. My mother, Dorothy, was only 19 when I was born. She was a young woman, pretty, recently married to my father, Dennis. Grandma Virginia's house was nearby, about 200 yards away, because back then families lived like that, all together, keeping an eye on each other. Of course, I don't remember anything from the day I was born. Right, dear? A baby doesn't remember, but they told me this whole story later, when I was a young woman and went looking for the truth. It was the midwife herself, Miss Barbara, who told me everything in detail. She was a short, fat woman with calloused, rough hands. She lived in the settlement and had already delivered over 300 babies in her life. I went to visit her a few days before leaving for Louisville, and she told me everything. She said that when she arrived that night, my mother had been screaming for hours, long, difficult labor. When I finally was born at dawn, before the rooster crowed, Miss Barbara picked me up and stood there frozen, unable to say anything. Skin too white, white as wall paint, thin hair, yellowish, the color of raw cotton, light eyes that in the reflection of the oil lamp light looked red. She had already seen many babies born crooked, with defects, with something missing, but this was different. She crossed herself 3 times and didn't know what to say. My mother asked to see. When she looked at me, she fainted right there. My father, who was in the yard smoking a hand-rolled cigarette, came in when Miss Barbara called, looked at me for a few seconds, turned his back and left. 3 days later, he came back just to get his things and left. He said that wasn't his daughter, that my mother had lain with the devil. He left, and no one ever saw him in those parts again. They say he went to another state. The coward abandoned me when I was less than a week old. Miss Barbara told me all this, looking at the floor, as if ashamed to repeat it. When she finished telling me, I thanked her. At least now I knew the whole truth. Grandma Virginia, who was my mother's mother, took charge of everything when my father left. She was a woman hard as stone, tall, thin, with deep black eyes and a thin mouth, always closed in a straight line. She was a widow, raised her children alone, worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset, devout Catholic, went to church every day, prayed the rosary 3 times a day, fasted every Friday. When she saw me for the first time, she didn't show surprise like the others, just slowly shook her head and decreed that this was God's punishment, that someone in that family had sinned heavily and that God had sent this punishment for everyone to learn and pay. No one had the courage to disagree with her. She was the one who chose my name, Miranda, and ordered me baptized in church. There was no party, nothing. It was a quick ceremony. Early morning, almost hidden. Just Grandma, my mother, and a cousin who served as godmother, but didn't even want to be there. The first things I really remember are from when I was older, about 3, 4 years old. I remember the tall wooden house, the floor that creaked, the suffocating heat under that tin roof. I remember the smell of coffee brewed in a cloth filter in the early morning, mixed with smoke from the wood-burning stove, the strong smell of the weeds that grew under the house, that smell of damp earth and rotting plants, the sound of chickens scratching in the yard, the rooster crowing at dawn. I remember the feeling of being different, even without fully understanding what it was. Grandma wouldn't let me go out in the Sunday. She said my skin couldn't take it, that I would die burned. The sun was my enemy. Any ray of sun that hit my skin burned like embers. Everything turned red, swollen, blistered. Sometimes they opened into sores, releasing a yellowish liquid that burned even more. Grandma would apply pork lard, sometimes some leaves she crushed in the mortar, but nothing really worked. The skin hurt for days, peeled, became raw flesh. I learned the most painful way that I had to hide from the Sunday. When I had to go out, it was only at dawn or late afternoon, when the sun was already weak. I saw other children playing in the street during the day, running in the hot sun, and I couldn't. I stayed inside the house, looking through the cracks in the boards, because if I stood looking out the window, she'd tell me to leave. My mother didn't talk to me. She lived silent, walking around the house like a sad shadow. When she looked at me, her gaze was empty, distant, as if she were looking at a place far away. She never hugged me, never played with me. Grandma was the one in charge of everything. She told me what I could and couldn't do. I ate at the table with everyone, but no one talked to me. Grandma served the food. Everyone ate in silence, and I stayed there quiet, afraid to make noise. Grits with collard greens, beans with bacon, cornmeal. Simple food, always the same. I ate looking at my plate, feeling the weight of the silence. I remember my little room in the back of the house. It was small, stuffy, with a narrow little window that faced the woods. I slept in an old wooden bed frame with a thin corn husk mattress that made noise every time I moved. A worn sheet, an old blanket. That's where I spent most of my time. I woke at dawn, hearing Grandma praying the rosary. That endless murmur, always the same words. I remember other children looking at me. When I went out, rarely, there was always someone looking. Adults crossed themselves, children pointed, whispered. I heard the words, even without fully understanding. Freak, ghost, devil's child. I'd run back home, scared, ashamed. The only person who was a little different was Aunt Rachel, my mother's younger sister. She lived nearby, came to visit from time to time. She was still young, must have been in her early 20s. Sometimes, when Grandma wasn't looking, she'd give me a candy, a cookie, run her hand through my hair with affection, but she was afraid of Grandma, couldn't do much. When I was about 8 years old, I already knew exactly how things worked. I knew I couldn't leave the house when the sun was high. I knew I had to stay quiet when there were visitors. I knew no one was going to hug me, give me affection, treat me like they treated other children. I was different, and everyone made a point of reminding me of that every day. Grandma Virginia woke at dawn, around 4 o'clock, when everything was still dark. I'd hear her moving around the house, lighting the fire in the wood-burning stove, putting water on to boil for coffee. She'd call me, her hard voice cutting through the silence of dawn. I'd get up sleepy, my body aching with tiredness, and go do my duties. I had to fetch water from the well. The well was about 50 yards from the house in the middle of the yard. It was a cistern, really, set into the ground. I'd go down those slippery stone steps with an old bucket in hand and scoop the cold water from the basin. But I couldn't complain. I'd fill the bucket, carry it back to the house. The water was heavy, spilled on my legs, wet my bare feet. I did this 3, 4 times, until I filled the jugs that stayed in the kitchen. Then I had to feed the chickens. I'd get the dried corn from a cloth sack, throw it in the yard, see that bunch of chickens scratching, clucking. The strong smell of the chicken coop, mixed with manure and packed earth, stuck to my clothes, my skin. I'd collect the eggs in the nests, put them in a clay bowl, take them inside. I had to wash clothes, too. At the stone wash basin in the back of the house, I'd scrub those clothes with lye soap that Grandma made. My hands would turn red, hurt, the skin cracking from so much scrubbing. The cold water hurt the wounds. I'd wring the clothes hard, hang them on the line that was stretched between 2 trees. The sun would start to rise, and I had to run inside before it got strong. I hated laundry day because I had to go many, many more times to that well to get water. It was during this time, when I was about 8 years old, that I couldn't take it anymore. It was a Sunday afternoon. Everyone from the settlement was on the street after church service. I heard the children playing, laughing, and something inside me broke. I disobeyed Grandma. I ran out of the house, barefoot, in an old little dress, and went toward the other children. I wanted to play. I wanted to be a child, too. When they saw me, they stopped playing. They all stood there staring at me. One of them, the oldest, daughter of the general store owner, started screaming, started calling me witch, ghost, freak. The others joined in, and then they started picking up stones from the ground. Small stones, large stones, the size of an egg, the size of a closed fist. The first stone hit my back. It hurt. It hurt so much I almost fell. It's unimaginable, isn't it? The cruelty of children, often learned from the fearful whispers of their parents. But the physical pain of those stones was nothing compared to what happened when she ran home for safety. The second hit my head. I felt hot blood running down my forehead, entering my eye, salty, burning. More stones on my arms, legs, back. They screamed while they threw. Devil's daughter, cursed thing. Go back to hell. I ran. I ran with stones hitting my body, with blood running, with pain cutting through everything. I got home crying, bleeding, my dress torn. Grandma was on the porch. When she saw me, she didn't run to hug me, didn't console me. She grabbed the hickory switch that hung on the wall and gave me a beating. She hit my back, my legs, my buttocks. She said I was disobedient, that I had made a scene, that I had shamed the family. Each switch hurt more than the stones. My mother stood there on the side watching, crying softly, but did nothing to defend me. You know, dear, the cuts from the stones and the welts from the switch. They heal. But my mother's eyes, her silence, that was the deepest wound of all. In that moment, I knew I was alone. Truly, completely alone. I spent days with my whole body sore. The marks from the stones, the marks from the switch. Everything hurt together. I learned that I couldn't go out, that the world out there didn't want me, that I had to stay hidden forever. It was around this time that Aunt Rachel started doing something different with me. She was my mother's younger sister, lived with her husband in a house nearby. When she came to visit and Grandma wasn't around, she'd sit with me in the little room in the back. She'd bring hidden things. Old newspaper, notebook left over from the neighbor's children, some simple little books. She started teaching me letters. First the A, the B, the C. She'd draw the letters on the dirt floor with a stick. I'd copy, repeat, memorize. She'd bring the old Bible she had at home, point to the words, teach me to join the letters together. It took time, it was hard, but I learned. She always told me not to tell Grandma. She was afraid, very afraid of her mother. If Grandma found out she was teaching me, she'd give her a beating. It didn't matter if she was an adult, if she was married. Grandma was the law, the supreme authority around there. So it was all hidden in the afternoons when Grandma went to the fields or to church for prayer meetings. It took years. From when I was 9 until I was 14, Aunt Rachel would come when she could and teach me. I learned to read slowly, word by word. First, the simple words, house, woods, bread, mother. Then the bigger ones, then whole sentences. Aunt brought old newspaper that wrapped bread at the store. And I'd read the news, the advertisements, everything. I'd read the Bible too, those old stories, that difficult language. Reading became my salvation. When I was alone in the little room, scared, lonely, I'd grab anything written I had and read. I'd read quietly so no one would hear. The words took me to other places, made me forget for a while that I was different, that I was rejected, that I was alone. I'd read and reread the same thing several times. I memorized entire passages from the Bible, Psalms, Proverbs, parables. That entered my head and stayed. The words were company. The stories were friendship. The books didn't reject me, didn't call me witch, didn't throw stones at me. I spent my childhood like this, working at dawn, hiding from the sun during the day, reading hidden in the afternoon, sleeping alone at night, seeing the world through cracks in the wall, hearing other children live the life I couldn't live, carrying on my body the marks of stones. The switch, the sun that burned, mosquitoes that bit, carrying in my chest the pain of being rejected by the whole world. When I was 11, I woke up startled one hot morning and saw blood on my nightgown. A lot of blood, spread out, running down my legs, staining the sheet and the corn husk mattress. I thought I was dying. I felt my heart racing, my hands shaking, my throat dry. I ran to the living room, screaming for Grandma, thinking something inside me had broken, that I was going to die right there. She came slowly, with that cold, tired look, and when she saw, she made a face of disgust mixed with impatience. She didn't ask anything, didn't hug me, didn't want to know if I was in pain. She just crossed her arms and said to stop, that it was the monthly cycle that every woman had, and that I should stop making a scene. In that house, no one spoke the real word. It was sinful. It was ugly to say menstruation. It was a doctor's thing, shameless woman's thing, those who talk loud and laugh on the street. The old women called it the monthly, or said their time had come or the sign appeared, always in a low voice, as if it were a dirty secret. And I, understanding nothing, stood there, red with shame and fear squeezing my chest. Grandma went to the wooden trunk at the foot of her bed. She opened it, rummaged through some old clothes, and pulled out a handful of torn rags, stained with rust and soap. She threw them in my hand and told me to figure it out. She said every woman did it like that nothing more was needed, that I should wash them well, hide them so no one would see, and never let a man know. I stood there, holding those rough rags, not knowing whether to cry or thank her for still being alive. Every month was the same thing. The pain in my belly, those terrible cramps that twisted everything inside, the blood that stained everything. Grandma said it was shameful, that a woman had to hide that it was Eve's punishment for being a woman. I didn't really understand. I just knew that one more thing had become a reason for shame in my life. One more thing I had to hide, that I had to suffer alone. My body started changing during this time. My breasts started growing. They hurt, got swollen. My hips widened, my waist narrowed. I'd look at my body and didn't recognize it anymore. It seemed like I was becoming another person. Grandma noticed and started dressing me in looser, more covered clothes. She said I couldn't make a scene, that a woman had to cover herself, hide herself. But men started looking differently, even with loose clothes, even being different, being albino, being rejected. They looked in a way that scared me, that made me want to disappear. When I went to fetch water from the well early in the morning, some men who passed by going to the fields would stop on the other side of the fence, look, talk low among themselves. I pretended not to see, but I did, and I was afraid. There was a neighbor, Mr. Harold, who lived 3 houses ahead. Married man, about 40-something years old, drunk. He started appearing near the house at times when Grandma wasn't there. He'd lurk around, looking, saying things I didn't quite understand, but that gave me chills. One night, I was in the yard giving corn to the chickens. It was already getting dark. That twilight when you can still see, but it's no longer day. He appeared out of nowhere, came from behind me, pulled me by the arm. His hand was thick, rough, squeezed hard. He tried to pull me close to him, tried to kiss me by force, the bastard. The smell of whiskey was so strong it made me nauseous. I screamed loud. I bit his hand hard. I tasted blood in my mouth. He let me go, cursed, ran away. I ran into the house, told Grandma when she arrived. I thought she was going to do something, that she was going to fight with him, that she was going to protect me, but no, she was furious. With me. She said I had given reason, that a woman who walks alone at night is asking for it, that I was to blame. She locked me inside the house for a whole week. I couldn't go out even to fetch water, even to feed the chickens. Nothing. I stayed locked in the little room, hungry, thirsty, afraid. It was during that week that I felt a hatred I had never felt before. Deep hatred that burned inside. Hatred for Grandma, who blamed me for everything. Hatred for my mother, who never defended me, who just stood there silent, watching everything. Hatred for God, who allowed all that. Hatred for being born, for being that way, for existing. When your only protector punishes you for the crimes of others, where do you turn? This terrible injustice planted a seed of anger that would change her. Keep listening to see how that anger transforms her. When the week ended and Grandma let me out, something inside me had changed. I wasn't just sad anymore, just lonely. I was angry at everyone. The months passed. I turned 13, 14. The same routine continued: work, hide, read when I could, but now there was that new anger, burning low inside me all the time. It was when I was 14 that something different happened. I started finding notes tucked into the wall of the house, little folded pieces of paper stuck in a crack in the stone foundation, right near the porch steps. The handwriting was crooked, poorly done, but readable. It said I was pretty, that I was different, but pretty, that he wanted to talk to me. Signed, Dylan. I knew who Dylan was. He was Mr. Anthony's son, owner of a small farm nearby, a boy my age, thin, shy, with dark eyes. I had seen him a few times from a distance, but had never talked to him. I was scared at first. I thought it was a prank, that he was going to make fun of me, call me witch like the others. But the notes kept appearing, always saying nice things, that he thought my eyes were pretty, that he didn't care what others said, that he wanted to be my friend. One day I left a note back. I wrote that he could talk to me at dawn when I went to fetch water from the well, that it was the only time I could go out without Grandma seeing. He appeared the next day. He was hiding behind the tree, near the well. We talked quietly, afraid of someone waking up. He spoke slowly, choosing his words. He said he thought the way people treated me was unfair, that I wasn't to blame for being born that way, that he liked being with me. For the first time in my life, someone was being kind to me. Someone wanted to be near me. It wasn't out of pity. It wasn't out of obligation. It was because they wanted to. I felt something in my chest that I didn't even know existed. Happiness. Real happiness. We continued talking in secret for a few weeks, always at dawn, always quickly, always afraid. He told me about his life, about plans to work on his father's farm, to one day have his own land. I told him about the books I read, about the things I learned. He listened attentively, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested. One day he held my hand. It was quick, just a few seconds, but I felt it. His hand was calloused, rough, warm. No one had ever held my hand like that, with affection, with desire. My heart raced so much, I thought it was going to come out of my mouth. But Grandma found out. I don't know who saw and told, but she found out. One morning, she grabbed me by the arm, dragged me out of the house, took me down to the street to the settlement center. It was Sunday. Everyone was coming out of church. She threw me on the ground there in front of everyone and started hitting me with a belt. She screamed that I was lost, that I was shameless, that I was just like my mother who had given herself to the demon. People stopped to watch. No one did anything. They just looked. The belt hit my back, my legs, my face. I cried, screamed, begged her to stop, but she didn't stop. When she finished, she left me there thrown on the ground and left. I went back home crawling, ashamed, in pain, destroyed. When you're beaten in private, that's one kind of pain. But when you are shamed in front of everyone, they don't just take your dignity. They take away your very reason to exist. They finally made me into the monster they always said I was. Dylan never appeared again, never left another note. I think his family forbade it, or maybe he himself got scared. It doesn't matter, he disappeared. That night I waited for everyone to sleep. I grabbed an old sheet, tied it to a beam in the little room ceiling, made a noose, put it around my neck. I wanted to die. I wanted to end all that. I climbed on a crate, put the noose on and jumped. But Aunt Rachel arrived. She told me later she'd had a terrible nightmare about me and couldn't sleep. So she walked over in the dark just to check. I don't know why she was really there at that hour. I never knew. To this day, I believe God sent her. Some things in this life just can't be explained by common sense, dear. When you're at the very bottom, sometimes God sends an angel. And that night, my angel was named Rachel. But she came running into the little room, grabbed me, cut the sheet with a knife. I fell to the floor, coughing, choking, crying. She hugged me. She cried with me, rocked me, told me not to do that one day things would get better. She didn't tell anyone, kept the secret, but watched me more after that. I didn't try again, not because things had gotten better, but because I was afraid it would go wrong again. And that pain in my neck lasted for days. So I decided I was going to live, not for me, but out of anger. Anger at everyone who wanted me to disappear. I was going to live just to prove I could. And to make my life worse, my mother died when I was 16. It was one day in September, early morning, before sunrise. I woke up to a strange noise coming from her room. It was a low, muffled moan. I got up running, went there. She was lying on the floor, on her side, with her mouth crooked, drooling, her eyes open, but not seeing anything. He screamed for Grandma. Grandma came running, looked at my mother, crossed herself, told me to go call neighbor Joe who had a wagon. When I came back with him, my mother had already died. Grandma said it was her heart, that she had always been weak in the heart since she was a girl. But I know it wasn't just that. It was sadness. It was guilt. It was the weight of a lifetime lived with fear, with silence, with cowardice. The wake was in the house living room. They placed the coffin on top of 2 old chairs. My mother inside with a blue dress that was the best she had. Her hands crossed on her chest, holding a rosary. Her face was white, faded, but there was something different. She looked at peace for the first time in her life. Some people from the settlement came. They stayed there praying, drinking coffee, eating biscuits. They looked at me sideways, whispered. I stayed in a corner quiet, without crying. I couldn't cry. I felt an enormous emptiness, a strange mixed thing. Part of me was sad because she was my mother, the woman who bore me, who carried me in her womb. But another part felt a terrible, guilty relief. She had suffered so much, and now she was free. Free from Grandma, free from shame, free from me. Grandma's eyes were red, but there were no tears. Maybe she cried hidden. I don't know. When it was time to close the coffin, Grandma told me to say goodbye. I approached slowly, my legs shaking. I looked at her face, touched her cold, hard hand, and then it all came at once. I felt an enormous pain in my chest. A pain that squeezed, that suffocated. The tears came hot, thick, wetting my whole face. I cried there, holding that cold hand, crying for the mother I lost and the mother I never had. Grandma told me to get out of the way, it was time to close. I let go of her hand, took a step back. I saw them closing the coffin lid, nailing the nails. My mother disappearing inside there forever. They buried her in the settlement cemetery, in a corner where the paupers' graves were. Grandma didn't want to spend money on a real tomb. They made a simple grave, threw dirt over it, placed a little wooden cross with her name written crookedly. People left soon after. I stayed there a while longer, looking at that pile of red earth. I thought that under there was the woman who could have loved me, who could have defended me, who could have been a mother, but wasn't. And now it was too late. Grieving for the mother she had, and grieving even more for the mother she never had. With her mother gone, Miranda was left completely at the mercy of her grandmother. The following months were strange. The house got emptier, more silent. Grandma continued the same, hard, bossing everyone around. I continued doing the same jobs, living the same life, but something had changed. I started thinking about running away, about leaving that place, that hell. I didn't know how, I didn't know where, but I thought about it every day. When I was 17, Aunt Rachel got pregnant. She had wanted a child for a long time. It took a while to get pregnant. She came to tell me all happy with that shine in her eyes. Said she was going to be a mother, that she was scared, but happy. I was happy for her. She was the only person who had been good to me in life. In the following months, her belly grew. She'd come visit me whenever she could, talk to me. She said that when the baby was born, she'd let me meet it, let me hold it. The baby was born in January, a fat, healthy boy with tan skin and black hair. I went to their house to visit, meet the baby. Aunt Rachel came to show me, put him in my lap. I held that warm, sweet-smelling little baby who slept peacefully. I felt an enormous desire to cry, and I cried. It was soon after that Grandma got sick. I had just turned 18. She woke up one morning and couldn't get out of bed. The right side of her body was soft, heavy, as if it no longer belonged to her. Her mouth crooked, her speech slurred, her gaze lost. She had had a stroke, but no one there knew the name for it. They just said the blood went to her head. They called a folk healer from the settlement. He arrived in a straw hat, put his ear to her chest, prayed quietly, and slowly shook his head. He said there was nothing to do, just wait and pray. When someone had a stroke, half the body died suddenly. The arm and leg on one side would be without movement, the mouth would fall, speech would come out slurred or not come out at all. Sometimes it came with mental confusion, drowsiness, or even loss of consciousness. Many stayed bedridden, dependent for everything. Eating, going to the bathroom, changing position. And if there was no hospital or physical therapy, as there often wasn't in rural areas back then, the person simply didn't recover, stayed in bed until they died or with permanent disabilities. It was left to me to take care of her. The uncles would come from time to time, but they wouldn't stay. They had their lives, their children, but I lived there. It was my obligation. They didn't want to do the dirty work, so it was me alone. Taking care of Grandma was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. I had to give her baths, wipe her body with a wet cloth, clean her private parts. I had to change her cloth diapers when she soiled herself, wash those filthy cloths in the basin. I washed them while nauseous. I had to feed her by mouth, spoonful by spoonful, watch her drool, choke, spit. I had to turn her in bed several times a day so she wouldn't get bed sores on her back. She couldn't speak properly, but her eyes spoke. Her eyes remained full of anger, of hate. They looked at me as they always had, with disgust, with contempt. Even there, paralyzed, depending on me for everything, she hated me. I saw it in her eyes. There were nights I sat on the edge of her bed, watching her sleep. I thought about pressing a pillow to her face, ending it all at once. She had tortured me my whole life, and now she was there vulnerable in my hand. It would be easy, it would be just. I thought about it. Certainly if it were me in her place, I wouldn't exist anymore. But I didn't do it. I don't know why. Maybe because there was still some humanity in me that she hadn't managed to kill. Maybe because I didn't want to be like her. Or maybe because I knew she was going to die anyway and I could wait. Looking at my own hand in that moment, I saw her. I saw her cruelty, right there inside of me. And I pulled my hand back. I could hate her, yes, but I would not let her turn me into a killer. I would not let her win that way. 6 months passed like this. 6 months taking care of her, cleaning her, enduring that look full of hate. Until one August morning, I went to take her breakfast, and she was dead. Eyes open, mouth open, body already cold and stiff. I stood there for a long moment, watching her. I expected to feel something, relief, or perhaps even a final surge of the anger I had carried for so long. Instead, there was just a profound, hollow stillness. It wasn't sadness. It was the sudden absence of the monster I had organized my entire life around avoiding. The world I knew was built on her rules and her cruelty, and in an instant, she was gone. I didn't cry for her, but I think, in that moment, I cried for the little girl who had deserved a grandmother's love and never received it. I closed her eyes, covered her face, and went to the uncle's house to notify them. They came, organized everything. The wake was similar to my mother's. Simple coffin, some people praying, coffee and biscuits. They buried her in the same cemetery, near my mother's grave. The day after the burial, Grandma's other children appeared at the house, 3 of them, Uncle Manuel, Aunt Rose, and Uncle John. These 3 were the oldest. They lived far away, each with their family, their life. When Grandma was alive, they barely appeared there. They didn't help with anything, didn't visit, didn't ask about anything. But now that she had died and the house was empty, they appeared quickly. They called me to talk. The 3 of them were sitting in the living room with serious faces, as if they owned everything. They said the house was going to be for them, that they were going to divide it among the family, that I had no right to anything, because I wasn't Grandma's direct blood. I was just a granddaughter through a dead mother. They grabbed an old can that had some change inside. They counted $50, put it in my hand. They said that was for me to leave, for me to disappear, that I had nothing there anymore, that it was time for me to look for my life far away. They said all that coldly, without even looking at me properly. After all she had endured, and all the care she had given, this was her reward. $50 and a final, cold rejection. It seems like the end. But this is the moment her true journey finally begins. Grandma had taught them well. Aunt Rachel wasn't even there. She was the youngest, the baby of them all. She had no voice in those decisions. The older siblings bossed everything, decided everything alone. She was also left aside, wasn't going to get almost anything from the inheritance either, but couldn't do anything. Her husband wouldn't let her get involved in family matters. He said it wasn't her problem. I knew that was going to happen. I didn't argue, didn't beg, didn't cry in front of them, just took the money, put it in my skirt pocket, and left there. I went to the little room in the back, grabbed an old bundle, put in 2 changes of clothes, the Bible that Aunt Rachel used to teach me, a hair comb, a faded photograph of my mother when she was young. That was all I had in the world. Aunt Rachel only appeared later, when the siblings had already left. She came alone, hiding with the baby in her arms. She was crying. She hugged me tight, apologized, said she wanted to help me, but couldn't, that her husband wouldn't let her, that the siblings didn't listen to her. She took from her dress pocket a tied cloth. Inside was $30. She said it was all she had saved, hidden, that it was for me to take care of myself, not to give up on life. She hugged me again, cried some more, kissed my forehead, and ran away before someone saw. The next morning, before sunrise, I grabbed my bundle and walked to the side of the road. I waited. It took about 2 hours for a pickup truck to pass. One of those that took people to Louisville, I signaled. The driver stopped, asked where I was going. I said I was going to Louisville. He said he charged $5. I paid. I climbed in the truck bed, sat in a corner among other people who were also leaving. The truck started. I kept looking back, seeing the settlement disappear in the road dust. The house where I grew up, the church where they baptized me, the cemetery where my mother and grandma were, everything getting small, disappearing. I didn't feel homesick, didn't feel sadness, just felt fear. Fear of what was coming, but I also felt something new, something I had never felt before. Hope. Small hope, weak, but there because for the first time in my life I was free. Free from grandma, free from the settlement, free from that prison. The pickup truck took almost 6 hours to get to Louisville. 6 hours bouncing in that truck bed, sitting on the hard floor, swallowing road dust. There were about 15 people there with me. Country people going to try their luck in the big city. Whole families with bundles of clothes, crying children, men smoking cigarettes and spitting over the side of the truck. When we finally entered the city, my mouth hung open. I had never seen anything like it. Tall buildings of 3, 4 stories, wide streets, paved, full of cars, buses, people running everywhere. The sound of horns, engines, people shouting. The smell was different too. Smell of smoke, exhaust, hot asphalt, food being fried in the diners on the corner. Everything was fast, big, scary. The truck stopped at the bus station. Everyone got out, grabbed their things, and ran off somewhere. I stood there, holding my bundle, not knowing where to go. The bus station was huge. There were people everywhere. People coming in, people going out, people selling things, people begging. The fluorescent lights were so strong my eyes hurt. The noise was deafening. Loudspeaker announcing buses, people talking loudly, children crying, vendors shouting prices for hot dogs and soda. I sat on a wooden bench, hugged my bundle, and stayed there. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know anyone, had nowhere to go, didn't know how the big city worked. Fear squeezed my chest, made my heart beat fast. I thought about going back, catching another truck back to the country. But go back to what? I had nothing left there. I had no house, no family, no one. I spent the first night right there on the bus station bench. I slept sitting with the bundle on my lap, afraid someone would steal. From time to time, I woke up startled, with some noise, with someone passing by. I saw other people sleeping there too. Homeless people, people with nowhere to go, beggars, crazy people, prostitutes. I was one more. Early in the morning, I was desperate to pee. I bought a ham sandwich from a cart and a cup of watery coffee, spent $2 and used the bathroom. I kept calculating how long the money would last. I had $80 in total. If I spent $2 a day on food, it would last about a month. But I needed to find a job before that. I needed to find a place to live. I spent the day walking around the city. I looked at store windows, saw pretty clothes, shoes, things I could never have. People looked at me, looked at my white skin, my yellowish hair, my light eyes, but it was different from the settlement. Here no one screamed, no one threw stones. They just looked, whispered among themselves and moved on. In the big city, strange people were normal. There were so many different people that I was just one more. On the second day, I saw a sign on the door of a boarding house. Cleaning lady needed. I went in. It was an old boarding house with 3 floors, with small rooms rented to men who worked in the factories and construction sites in the city. The place smelled of mold, cigarettes, reheated food. The owner, Miss Linda, was a fat, short woman with a gruff voice. She wore a dirty apron and had her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She looked me up and down, asked my name, my age, where I came from. I answered everything in a low voice, afraid she'd send me away. She kept looking at me for a few seconds, thinking, then said she could give me the job. She paid little, $15 a week, but I could sleep in a little room in the back and eat the boarding house leftovers. I accepted right away. $15 was very little, but it was better than nothing. And having a roof, having food, was already more than I had. The little room was tiny, fit only a narrow single bed and a crate that served as a little table. It had no window, just a crack near the ceiling where a little light came in. The work was hard. I woke at 5 inches the morning, swept the boarding house's 3 floors, cleaned the communal bathrooms, washed the breakfast dishes, scrubbed the kitchen floor. Then I'd go out to work in the houses Miss Linda arranged. I'd go from house to house, cleaning everything. I'd mop the floor, wash clothes by hand, clean bathrooms, dust furniture. My body ached, my hands were raw, my back burned. On those days, I'd get to the boarding house at 8, 9 at night, dead tired. I'd eat something cold that was left over, take a cold shower and fall into bed. The next day, everything again. I found out later that she earned 50% of the money the houses paid, just because she referred me, without doing any hard work. That upset me so much. But I had no choice, dear. I had work, I had a roof, I had food. It was more than I had in the settlement. And in the big city, no one hit me. No one insulted me. I was invisible, but I was free. At 20, I got a better job. One of the houses where I cleaned belonged to a nurse who worked at St. Luke's Hospital. She felt sorry for me, saw that I worked well, that I was trustworthy. She said they needed a cleaning lady at the hospital, that they paid better than house cleaning, $25 a week. She asked if I wanted to try. I said yes, because all the money would come to me. I went there the next day. St. Luke's Hospital was a large 4-story building, all painted white, but already peeling in several corners. It was a public hospital, always crowded, always full of sick people, dying people, people being born. The smell was strong, a mix of disinfectant, alcohol, ether, medicine, blood, and disease, but there was something about it I liked. It was the smell of people trying to save people. It was the smell of hope. They hired me, thank God. Before starting at the hospital, I had to resolve the housing situation. I went to talk to Miss Linda at the boarding house. I explained I had gotten a better job. She was disappointed, worried, because she was going to lose the cleaning lady. She profited a lot from me, so she offered me 70% more pay. The thing is, I couldn't go back on my word, and didn't want that either. I also asked if I could continue living in the little room in the back, but now as a paying tenant, no longer as an employee. She thought a bit, counted on her fingers and said she'd charge $10 a week. It was expensive for a tiny room without a window that smelled of mold, but it was close to the hospital. I could walk there, and as a single woman, especially albino, it would be very difficult to find another place that would accept renting me a room. I accepted the deal. $15 a week remained for food and other things. It was tight, but it worked. I started working, cleaning the wards. I'd mop the floor, wash the beds after someone died. I'd change the sheets dirty with blood and urine. I'd clean the bathrooms, the stretchers, the corridors. The heaviest work was in the operating room. When an operation was over, I'd go in to clean. The floor all red, the tables stained, the walls splattered, gauze, cloths, gowns, everything wet with blood. They'd throw the scraps in iron buckets, pieces they took from people, human flesh mixed with cotton and cloth, strong smell of open flesh, of viscera. Then they'd take it to bury or burn out back, in a hole at the back of the yard. The smell was strong, of hot blood and old disinfectant. At first, I felt nauseous, my stomach turned. Then I got used to it. I had to get used to it. I liked working at the hospital. I saw doctors saving lives, sewing people up, taking bullets out of criminals, delivering women's babies. I saw nurses caring for the sick with patience, with affection. I saw people arriving almost dead and leaving walking. I saw babies being born, crying, full of life. All that made me feel like I was part of something important. I cleaned the blood, I cleaned the dirt, and with that I was helping save people too, even if it was just myself. The nurses were different from the bosses of the houses where I worked before. They treated me well, greeted me, thanked me when I cleaned a room well. One of them, Sister Margaret, was a nun, worked in pediatrics, a woman about 50 years old, thin, always in a white cap and starched apron. She started talking to me during breaks. She'd ask how I was, if I was eating well, if I needed anything. One day she saw me sitting in the cafeteria reading an old newspaper I had found. She was surprised, asked if I knew how to read. I said yes. She smiled, said she'd bring books for me, and she did. Every week, she appeared with a different book. Old novels, poetry, history books. I devoured everything. I'd read during breaks, read before sleeping, read whenever I could. Mark Twain, Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Those words took me to places I would never know, made me feel things I had never felt, made me dream. It was around that time I started thinking that maybe, just maybe, my life could be different. Maybe one day someone could look at me and not see an aberration. Maybe one day someone could love me. It was a small dream, almost impossible, but it was there growing slowly inside me. In 1979, 4 years after I had started working at the hospital, something happened that changed my life forever. A team of foreign doctors arrived at St. Luke's Hospital. It was a humanitarian mission from an organization called Doctors Without Borders. They came from several different countries to help in American public hospitals because there was a shortage of doctors, a shortage of everything. They were going to stay 6 months attending for free, doing surgery, teaching the doctors here. When they arrived, the hospital got all agitated, nurses arranging everything, the director running from one side to the other, everyone wanting to make a good impression. They told me to clean the entire surgery wing, leave everything shining. I spent the whole day scrubbing the floor, cleaning walls, polishing the metal gurneys until they gleamed. There was a team of cleaning ladies like me, of all types and ages. We were taking extra care with everything, the way they ordered. I saw the foreign doctors arriving. There were about 8 of them, men and women from different countries. They spoke English with a strange accent, got lost in the corridors. They didn't know anything yet. One of them caught my attention right away. He was tall, taller than the men here, thin, kind of gangly, with broad but hunched shoulders. He was in his early 30s, light brown hair, kind of messy, light blue eyes, big nose. He wore thin-framed glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He had a professorial air, like someone who thinks a lot. He seemed serious, but when he smiled, his whole face changed. He became kind, warm. I saw him for the first time when I was cleaning the pediatric wing corridor. It was mid-afternoon, the sun coming through the high windows, that golden late afternoon light. I was on my knees on the floor, scrubbing with a brush and soap, my hands red from so much cold water. I heard footsteps coming down the corridor, but I didn't raise my head. I never raised it. I learned it was better to be invisible, but the footsteps stopped near me. I felt someone was looking. I slowly raised my head. It was him. He was standing there, looking at me with a strange expression. It wasn't disgust. It wasn't pity. It wasn't fear. It was curiosity, scientific curiosity, the kind of someone trying to understand something. He said something in English, but with such a heavy accent I didn't understand right. He repeated slowly, asked if I had albinism. I stood there, not knowing what to answer. That word, albinism, I had never heard in my life. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was an insult, an ugly name to call me. He realized I wasn't understanding. He crouched near me, got to my height, pointed to my skin, to my hair, to my eyes, explained with that careful English, more patient, that albinism was a genetic condition, that it was lack of melanin in the body, that it wasn't a disease, wasn't a curse, wasn't God's punishment. It was just genetics, something from birth, like having blue eyes or curly hair. I stood there looking at him without believing. For the first time in my life, someone was talking about me, about my body, with respect, science, without superstition, without disgust, without fear, just explaining, as if it were normal. Imagine hearing, for the first time at 24, that you are not a curse, you are just human. This one conversation with Philip began to heal wounds that were decades deep. He asked if I took care of my skin, if I protected myself from the sun, if I had vision problems. I answered yes, that my skin burned easily, that my eyes hurt with strong light. He nodded, said it was normal in people with albinism, that I needed to use sunscreen, a hat, sunglasses, that I needed to have follow-up with an ophthalmologist, because albinos had a common vision problem. He said all that as a doctor, professional, but with kindness. He asked my name. I said quietly, Miranda. He smiled, extended his hand. He said his name was Philip, that he was a Norwegian doctor, that he was going to work there for 6 months. His hand was large, warm, soft. He squeezed my hand firmly, as if I were an important person, someone who deserved respect. After that day, Philip started greeting me whenever he saw me. Good morning, Miranda. Good afternoon, Miranda. How are you? At first, I was embarrassed, not knowing how to respond. I wasn't used to kindness, but he continued every day, always smiling, always respectful. Once he said I should use sunscreen, a white ointment that prevented the sun from burning the skin. It was the second time he said that. The first time I pretended I understood, but the truth is, I had never heard of that. I said they didn't sell it here. So he said he'd try to get one for me, and he got a small tube with letters in Norwegian. The smell was strong, kind of sweet. I applied it one day, and for the first time the sun didn't burn so much. A few weeks later, he started bringing books. Books in English about albinism, about genetics, about skin, about eyes. He'd leave them with me. He said if I wanted to read and learn about my own condition, I read everything, devoured those books. I learned that albinism was recessive, that it needed 2 genes to happen, that there were several different types, that people with albinism had extremely sensitive skin, high chance of skin cancer, vision problems like nystagmus and photophobia. I read complicated, scientific words, and for the first time I understood what I was. It wasn't a curse, it wasn't punishment, it was genetics, it was science, it was explainable. And you know what else? The strangest thing is that there, even inside a hospital, surrounded by doctors, no one had ever told me this. Not a word. 4 years and nothing. I don't know to this day if it was because they also didn't know or if they knew, but preferred to pretend they didn't see. No one touched on the subject of my albinism. I started looking for Philip during breaks. He'd have coffee in the doctor's cafeteria, But sometimes he'd come to the staff cafeteria too. He'd sit with me, talk, ask about my life, about what I had read in the books. I'd tell him, shy at first, more relaxed later. He listened attentively, asked questions, seemed really interested. He told me about Norway, about what it was like there. He said there people knew about albinism, that there was adequate treatment, medical follow-up, that people with albinism lived normal lives, worked, married, had children. I'd hear that and couldn't believe it. A place where people like me were normal. A place where no one threw stones, no one insulted, no one treated like an aberration. Philip started teaching me words in Norwegian. God morgen, he said, means good morning. Then came tak, which was thank you, and var so god, which served to say please or you're welcome, depending on the time. I'd repeat slowly, finding it funny, that strange sound in my mouth, as if each word came from a place too far for me. Then it was my turn. I taught him how we spoke around here. The simple way of the people, the expressions from the countryside, the words that didn't come in any dictionary. He'd try to repeat, get it wrong, get all tangled up, and we'd laugh. It was light, natural, beautiful. It was the first time in my life I laughed like that. Free, without fear. A real laugh, the kind that escapes on its own, as if the world for an instant had become good. I realized my heart raced when I saw him. When I heard his footsteps in the corridor, my chest tightened. When he smiled at me, I felt heat rising to my face. When he talked to me, I was breathless. I knew what that was. I had felt it once with Dylan when I was a girl, but now it was different. It was stronger, deeper, scarier. Because Philip wasn't a settlement boy. He was a doctor, Norwegian, foreigner, cultured, handsome. And I was a cleaning lady, albino, poor, uneducated. It didn't make sense. He was being kind. That's all. Maybe he felt sorry. Maybe it was just scientific interest. I was a rare case for him. It couldn't be anything else. But even knowing it didn't make sense, I couldn't stop thinking about him. I dreamed about him at night. I woke with his face in my head. I spent the day waiting for break time, the time to see him, to talk, to hear that accent I loved. The months passed and Philip continued there. His humanitarian mission was for 6 months, but he was already in his 4th month, and we talked more and more. It wasn't just break conversation in the cafeteria anymore. He started inviting me for coffee after work. There was a small diner on the hospital corner, one of those simple ones, with iron tables on the sidewalk, checkered plastic tablecloth, smell of bread on the griddle, and brewed coffee. The owner was a nice lady who called everyone honey. Philip took me there for the first time on a Friday afternoon. He ordered 2 coffees and 2 buttered rolls. We sat at a table in the corner. He talked. I listened. He told me about Norway, about the big cities there, about snow, about beer, about things I would never see in life, but that I liked to imagine. I started waiting for those afternoons. I'd finish work running, take a quick shower, change clothes, and go meet him at the diner. The owner already knew me, smiled when I arrived, already left the coffees ready. Philip always arrived later, still in a white coat, tired from a whole day of operating, but always smiling when he saw me. He started taking me to see the city, places I had never been, that I didn't even know existed. He took me to a big square with old trees, wooden benches, fountains in the middle. It was Sunday morning. There were families walking, children running, popcorn vendors. We sat on a bench, stayed there watching the movement. He bought popcorn for us. We stayed eating, talking about nothing, about everything. He took me to a museum, an old building, made of stone, with old paintings on the walls. I had never been in a museum in my life. I'd look at those paintings, those sculptures, not believing people made all that. Philip explained about the artists, about the eras, about techniques. I didn't understand half, but I liked to listen. I liked being there in that beautiful place, with him by my side, treating me as if I were a normal person who deserved to know art. He took me to a public library, a huge building, full of books from floor to ceiling. The smell was of old paper, of stored knowledge. Philip showed me how to borrow books, how the system worked. I got 3 books that day: novels, poetry, a book about American history. I read everything in 2 weeks. I went back, got more. The library became my favorite place in the city. On these outings, Philip would tell me about his life, about how he decided to be a doctor. His father had gotten sick when Philip was a teenager, a disease that had a cure, that had treatment, but they discovered too late. His father died in 6 months. Philip was 15 years old. He decided right there he was going to be a doctor. He was going to save people. He wasn't going to let anyone else die from lack of treatment. He studied hard, got into university, graduated, started working with humanitarian missions because he wanted to help poor people, people who didn't have access to good doctors. I'd hear all that and be amazed. He could be in Norway working in a private hospital or his own practice, earning lots of money even in Europe, having a comfortable life. But he chose to work with Doctors Without Borders. He received a salary, of course, but it was a modest salary, much less than he'd earned there. And he worked in difficult conditions in a public hospital falling apart, treating people who had no way to pay a doctor. He could have chosen an easy life, but he chose to help those who needed it most, even if it meant earning less, living more simply, giving up comfort. I realized I was falling in love. It wasn't just attraction. It wasn't just gratitude for him being kind. It was real love. Love that hurts, that squeezes the chest, that takes away sleep. When I thought he would leave, love that makes you want to be near the person all the time, that makes the world more beautiful when the person is around. But I was afraid to speak, afraid to ruin everything. It was on a Sunday afternoon, almost nightfall, that everything changed. We were sitting on a bench in the square, that same square he had taken me to the first time. The sun was setting, leaving everything golden, orange, beautiful. There were few people in the square. It was almost empty, just the sound of birds returning to their nests and the wind in the tree leaves. Philip was quiet for a while, just looking at the sunset. Then, suddenly, he held my hand. His hand was big, warm, firm. My heart raced. I almost pulled my hand back from shock, from fear, from shame, but he held it tenderly, intertwined his fingers in mine, turned to me, those blue eyes looking straight into mine. He spoke with that accent I loved, with that serious but kind voice, said he had fallen in love with me, that I was the strongest person he had ever met, that I had been through so many bad things, but remained kind, remained good, remained with a desire to learn, to grow. He said I was intelligent, that I read more than many doctors he knew. He said I was beautiful, that my eyes were the most beautiful color he had ever seen, that my smile lit up his day. He said he wanted to be with me, that he wanted to know me more, that he wanted to build something with me. I started crying. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought I was dreaming, that I was going to wake up in the boarding house little room and discover I had invented everything. But he wiped my tears with his thumb, held my face in his hands and kissed me. It was my first real kiss. Soft, slow, full of affection. His lips were soft, warm, tasted like coffee. The world disappeared around us. There was only me, him, that kiss. When we finished, I looked at him, unable to say anything. He smiled, asked if I wanted to date him. I said yes, still crying, still not believing. After that night, the kiss, the dating request, some things changed. We started being more careful, not because we were ashamed of each other, but because society was still cruel. A different couple drew attention. He foreign me, albino. People looked, whispered, judged. At the hospital where everyone knew us, it would be an easy target for gossip, for meanness, for people wanting to interfere. So, we started meeting farther away. We stopped having coffee at the diner on the hospital corner. We'd go to more distant neighborhoods, where no one knew us. Far squares, simple restaurants in other parts of the city, places where we could just be a normal couple. Well, not quite. Those were the happiest months of my life. Philip introduced me to a world I didn't know. A world of affection, respect, real love. He treated me like a queen. He'd open doors for me, pull out chairs, hold my hand on the street without shame. He'd give me small gifts he bought at the farmer's market, a flower, a new notebook, chocolate. He'd take me for walks, to eat at cheap but good restaurants. He'd teach me more words in Norwegian. We laughed a lot, talked about everything, dreamed together. His humanitarian mission ended after 6 months, but he managed to extend it, managed to stay longer. He said he didn't want to leave, that he had found a reason to stay. He'd look at me when he said that. My heart almost exploded with happiness. I turned 26 inches July. Philip wanted to do something special for me. Since we were dating in secret, he couldn't throw a big party, but he called 2 people I trusted, Sister Margaret and Miss Linda. They both already knew about our relationship, supported us, kept the secret. The party was in the boarding house's little room, at night. There was simple cornbread that Miss Linda made, lemonade, candles for me to blow out. It was my first birthday party in life. I cried with emotion when they and Philip sang happy birthday to me, quietly so as not to bother anyone. It was that night, in front of both of them. Philip got nervous, which was rare for him. He took a deep breath, knelt in front of me, took from his pocket a small box. Inside was a simple ring, silver, with a little blue stone. He asked for my hand in marriage. He said he loved me, that he wanted to spend his life with me, that he wanted to build a family with me. He asked if I accepted to marry him. I couldn't speak. I could only cry. I cried and shook my head, yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He put the ring on my finger. It was loose, too big, but it was the most beautiful ring I had ever seen in my life. He hugged me, kissed me, cried with me. When he left, Miss Linda said I had won the lottery. She considered him a rich and fancy man. That night, lying in the little room, looking at the ring on my finger, shining in the little light that came through the crack, I couldn't sleep. My life had changed so much. The rejected girl, stoned, who grew up thinking she was a curse, now had someone who loved her, someone who wanted to marry, who wanted to spend life together. It seemed like a miracle. A birthday party, a proposal. These are the simple joys she was always denied. It's a perfect, beautiful moment. But happiness built in secret is fragile, and the outside world was about to come crashing in. Philip sent a letter to his family in Norway. A long letter telling them about me, about the engagement, about the plans. He explained about the albinism. He explained that I was a good, hard-working, intelligent person. He asked for the family's blessing. The answer took 3 months. 3 months of waiting, of anxiety. Philip got nervous every time correspondence arrived at the hospital, until one day it arrived. A large envelope, with several papers inside, letters from his mother, from his siblings, from his aunt. He opened it right there in the hospital corridor. Sitting on the patient's bench, I started reading over his shoulder. Even though my Norwegian was weak, you could understand the tone. The words were hard, cutting. Philip kept getting paler as he read. His hands trembled, holding the papers. Of course, I didn't really understand what was written, but later he read it to me. His mother, Mrs. Bergman, was the cruelest. She wrote that he was throwing his life away, that he had studied so much, tried so hard, to now marry an albino cleaning lady from America. She wrote that albinism was a serious genetic defect, that I shouldn't have children, that I would pass that on to her grandchildren. She wrote that the whole family was ashamed, that the neighbors were already asking about his marriage, and that she didn't know what to answer, that I was inadequate for the Bergman family, which came from an important lineage in Norway, that if he married me, he would no longer be welcome in her house. The siblings wrote similarly, saying he was being irresponsible, immature, that this was a phase that would pass, that he should return to Norway, resume his life there, forget this madness. Only one aunt, his late father's sister, wrote differently. She said she understood he wanted to follow his heart, but to think carefully that marriage with so much difference was difficult, that society was going to be cruel. It wasn't a mean letter. It was a worried letter, but it hurt just the same. Philip finished reading and stood there, looking at the floor. He didn't say anything for a few minutes. I didn't say anything either. I didn't know what to say. Part of me already expected that. Rich family, Norwegian, important, would never accept someone like me. But seeing it written, Seeing all those words saying I was inadequate, that I was shameful, that I had defects, hurt deep. I thought Philip would give up, would tell me it wasn't possible, that family was too important, that he couldn't give them up for my sake. Part of me was even prepared for that. I was already saying goodbye to him in my head, but he did differently. You see, my entire life, anyone who showed me kindness was eventually taken away. I was used to being abandoned. I was prepared for that pain. What I wasn't prepared for was that, for the first time in my life, someone chose me over his entire family. He took a deep breath, folded the letters, put them back in the envelope, looked at me with those blue eyes, and said he was going to respond to the family, that he was going to make it clear that he loved me, that he was going to marry me, and that if they didn't accept, the problem was theirs, that I wasn't a defect, wasn't shameful, wasn't inadequate, that I was the woman he loved. Period. That same night, in the boarding house room, he wrote the response, a long letter in Norwegian, which he read to me translating. He told his mother he was disappointed in her, that she had raised him to be a doctor, to help people, to make a difference in the world. And now that he had found someone really worthwhile, someone strong, courageous, good, she rejected out of prejudice. He said I had suffered my whole life because of people who judged by appearance and that he wasn't going to let his own mother do the same. He said he was going to marry me, with or without the family's blessing, and that he hoped one day she would change her mind, but that if she didn't, he'd live without her support. He sent the letter the next day, never received a response. That extra time they gave him ended shortly after. He had to return to Norway or find a way to stay in America. He chose to stay. He went after validating his diploma, doing the necessary exams, all the paperwork. During all that time, I lived in fear. Fear that he would regret it. Fear that one day he would wake up and realize the size of the sacrifice he was making. He had left his family, his country, everything for me, for an albino cleaning lady who had nothing to offer. Sometimes I'd wake up at night in the boarding house little room alone, with nightmares. Then I'd keep thinking that couldn't be real, that it would end, that he'd leave. But every time we met, he'd hug me and say I wasn't a sacrifice, that I was a choice, that he had chosen this life because it was the life he wanted. With me, Philip had to leave Street Luke's hospital, and until he could validate his diploma, it could take months, maybe a year. And meanwhile, he needed to earn money somehow. He started doing odd jobs in private hospitals, on-call shifts, day work, work without registration. They paid under the table, paid little, but it was what there was. He worked in a different hospital almost every day. Sometimes he'd go nearby, other times far away, another part of the city. We no longer saw each other every day, and I almost died from so much longing. After 2 months doing these odd jobs, he got a position at a community health center in the outskirts. It wasn't official yet, because his paperwork hadn't come through, but the center desperately needed a doctor, and they agreed to hire him kind of informally. The salary was small, but it came with an apartment. A small apartment on the second floor of an old building, near the center. Part of the payment was in housing. That's when he made me the proposal. He asked if I wanted to live with him. He said we were seeing each other too little, and that if we lived together, at least we wouldn't go a day without seeing each other. Even if it was just to see each other briefly, it was worth it. And the hard part, my dear, is that back then there weren't these facilities of today, no. There were no cell phones, no house phones for us to talk. Couples didn't send messages, didn't call to say, I miss you. When the person left, we just waited, not knowing if they still thought about us on the other side. I didn't know what to answer. Living together without being married was serious. But I wanted to. I wanted so much. I said I'd think about it. I told Miss Linda everything in her little room alone. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me seriously for a long time, with that look of someone who has lived a lot. She asked if Philip and I had already gone to bed. I turned red, died of shame. I said no, quietly, then sighed and said slowly, My dear, this is real love. A man who stays so long by a woman's side without demanding anything, without wanting to take advantage, it's because he really cares. She said I could trust Philip, that if he only wanted bed, he would have found a way a long time ago. She said a man whose head is only on that doesn't wait so long, doesn't treat a woman with that kind of care. If he invited you to live with him, it's because it's serious, she said firmly. Whoever only wants to play doesn't make an invitation like that. Marriage comes later. What's important is respect. Then she started asking me more direct things. Does he insist on going to bed? Does he put his hands where he shouldn't? Does he pressure? I told her everything without hiding anything. I said no, that he never forced me to do anything, that sometimes he'd hug me, hold me tight, and I'd feel my whole body catch fire, but that he always stopped, smiled, changed the subject, pretended nothing had happened. She listened to me quietly, nodding her head. So that's it, Miranda. This is respect. This is beautiful love. You can go without guilt, my dear. A man like that is rare. I myself never had one. I stayed there silent. Thinking about her words, Miss Linda lit a cigarette, took a deep drag and let out the smoke slowly, without looking at me. It seemed she was choosing her words. I'm not a woman to apologize, Miranda, she began in a lower voice. But today, I'm going to do it. She took another drag, looked at the floor. When you arrived here, I saw an opportunity to have someone to help me, to do the heavy work I couldn't handle anymore. And to tell the truth, I thought you'd break in the first week. All pale like that, scared, with cat eyes. I thought you'd be a burden. She stopped, looked at me with watery eyes, but without losing her tone, and I widened my eyes. But why? Out of nowhere, that subject. I exploited you, yes. I kept part of your money, made you do what was my work, and still complained. I did that because I could, because the world is like that. Those in charge are afraid of losing the little they have. Silence. Just the sound of the street outside, an old radio playing distant country music. But over time, she continued, moving her hands nervously. I saw you were different, that you didn't complain, that you did everything right, that you were ashamed to ask, but never failed to show respect. And that started weighing on me, girl, weighing more than the sins I confessed to no priest. Her voice failed. I treated you badly. I thought I was defending myself, but it was fear. Fear of seeing in you what I never had the courage to be. Decent. She got up slowly, put out the cigarette in the ashtray, and, for the first time, put her hand on my arm. We started off wrong, Miranda. Very wrong. I used you, but I learned from you what it is to be ashamed of doing evil to someone who only gives you good. Then she gave a half smile. If you're going to live with that Norwegian, go. Go without guilt. And if one day he makes you cry, come back here. I don't promise hugs, but I promise a free roof. What a complicated, human moment. That tough-as-nails woman finally showed her heart. In her own gruff way, Miss Linda gave Miranda something she never got from her own mother. A blessing and a safe place to land. She was a hard woman, dear. That apology. For her, it was harder than moving a mountain. But I understood her. We were both women who had to fight just to exist, and in the end, she saw me. She truly saw me. She turned her back, wiped the corner of her eye with her apron, and left the room without saying anything else. I stood there looking at the door, thinking about everything. I knew our relationship hadn't been the same for a long time. The truth is that even with everything she had done, I liked Miss Linda. I liked her rough way, her sharp tongue, that hardness that hid a tired heart. To me, it didn't matter whether she apologized or not. I had already understood the type of woman she was. But even so, when I heard her admit she had acted wrongly toward me, I felt a relief I can't even explain. It was as if, for an instant, all the weight of what I had lived there became lighter, as if an old weight had dissolved in the air along with the cigarette smoke that still lingered in the room. The next day, when he arrived to know my answer, he saw me with my bundles ready in hand. I said yes to Philip. The apartment was small, but it was better than any place I had ever lived. On the second floor of a 4-story building with a concrete staircase, it had a living room that also served as a bedroom, with a double bed against the wall, an old wardrobe, a little table. It had a tiny kitchen with a 2-burner stove, sink, a shelf. The bathroom was small, but it was ours. Just ours, with an electric shower. The living room window faced the street. There was light coming in. There was life. The first night was strange. We had simple dinner I made, rice with eggs. We washed the dishes together, me washing, him drying, and then we stood there, not really knowing what to do. I showered after him, came out in my big, loose, ugly nightgown, but it was the only one I had. Philip realized I was nervous. He sat next to me on the bed, held my hand, said we didn't need to rush, that we could just sleep, but I didn't want to just sleep. I kissed him. He responded slowly, carefully. We started taking off each other's clothes. I was shaking all over. When I was naked in front of him, I wanted to cover myself. I was ashamed of my body, but he held my hands, moved them away, kept looking. We did it. It was nice, wonderful. It even hurt at first, bled a little, but then it was good. He was careful, slow, asking if I was okay. Then we stayed embraced in bed. It didn't seem real. At dawn, he looked for me again and I responded. The next day, I woke up consumed by a shame that burned me inside. The light coming through the window made everything too clear, and me there, exposed, not knowing where to hide. I tried to cover myself, reach for my nightgown, but he pulled me back. He said he wanted to look at me, that I didn't need to hide anything. I didn't know what to do, my heart racing, my face burning. Even with my body trembling, I did what he asked, without quite understanding what I was feeling. Fear, modesty, desire, all mixed together. He went crazy, and we did it again. Then he told me some things that made me jealous. He said he had been with other women before, that he had girlfriends back in Norway, but that none of them made him feel the way I did, and that my body was the most beautiful he had ever seen naked. I cried, because no one had ever talked about my body like that. Each one went to work, but now it was funny. Things had reversed. He walked, and I took the bus. I spent the whole day with my head elsewhere, counting the hours to go home. It seemed we lived in an endless honeymoon. We just had to look at each other for everything to start again. That fire, that desire, that silly joy of being close, that man was everything in my life. The following months were the happiest of my life so far. I'd wake up early, make coffee, see Philip leaving for the health center. I continued working at St. Luke's Hospital as a cleaning lady. I'd return after him in the early evening, make food for us. We'd have dinner together, talk, laugh. We made love every night. Only on those monthly days that we respected. We slept cuddled up. At the hospital, everyone already knew we lived together. It was a subject in the corridors, in the cafeterias, even in the locker room. Some looked with admiration, others with spite, and there was always someone who'd make a little joke or give a crooked look. They said I had hooked the Norwegian doctor, that he had only stayed in the country because of me and that hurt a lot of people. There was one in particular, Jessica from reception, pretty girl, one of those who knew the effect they had. Dark hair, straight, hitting her shoulder, red lipstick, always perfumed. She hated me, and I knew exactly why. I found out from a gossipy nurse that she was always hitting on him before we assumed our relationship. She did everything to get attention. Forced little laugh, touch on the arm, silly compliment. But deep down, I thanked God he didn't work there anymore. What if one day she got what she wanted? They say men are weak, and I don't doubt it. And that Jessica, with that rehearsed smile and that hunting look, was the type of woman who could turn anyone's head. Just thinking about it gave me a chill in my stomach, fear, jealousy, and also that stubborn pride of knowing that, in the end, it was me he chose to stay with. About 8 months passed. That's when Philip's paperwork finally came through complete. He managed to validate his diploma for good, got his American registration official. The health center formalized his contract, increased his salary a bit. We continued in the same apartment, but now with everything right, legal, documented. It was only after living together, almost a year, that we decided to really marry, make it official in church. Not because anyone demanded it, but because we wanted to. And that's when we scheduled the wedding at St. Anthony's Church. We got married in '82, me at 27 years old, him at 34, 7 years difference. Simple ceremony at St. Anthony's Church on a Saturday morning. Small church, old, with old wooden benches and smell of wax candle. There weren't many people. Sister Margaret was there, all emotional, wiping tears with a little handkerchief. Miss Linda, too, in a nice dress, smiling broadly. Some hospital colleagues Philip had called, some of his patients from the health center who insisted on coming. In total, about 25 people. Miss Linda went to the store with me. We chose the dress. Simple dress, white, cheap fabric. It had long sleeves to protect my skin, round neckline, straight skirt to the ankle. It wasn't a magazine dress. It wasn't an expensive store dress, but it was my wedding dress. And I felt like the most beautiful woman in the world when I wore it. I entered the church alone. I had no father or father-in-law to take me to the altar. I had no family at all, but it didn't matter. I walked slowly down the aisle. Philip was there in front, in a dark suit. When he saw me, he smiled in that way that made his whole face change. His eyes shone, filled with tears. The priest was an old man, with a trembling voice, who did the whole ceremony in half an hour. He read the vows with that solemn tone, asked if we accepted each other in joy and sadness, in health and sickness, and then blessed the rings. They were simple rings, but gold, chosen carefully. This time, Philip wanted me to go with him to the jewelry store so that what happened the other time wouldn't happen again. When the ring was loose on my finger, we tried several, one by one, until we found the right pair. When the priest told us to exchange them, they fit perfectly. When the priest said Philip could kiss the bride, he pulled me close, held my face in his hands, and kissed me. A long kiss, full of promise, full of love. People clapped. We left the church hand in hand, husband and wife. The sun was strong outside, but for the first time in my life I didn't care. I didn't care about the skin that would burn, didn't care about the eyes that burned. I only felt happiness. Happiness so big it didn't fit inside me. After the ceremony, we went home to celebrate in the building's hall where we lived. It wasn't big, but it had tall windows, waxed floor, and some white curtains that let the sun in beautifully. Philip and I had prepared everything together the night before. We spent the day laughing, trying to fit our small banquet into the savings we had put away. We bought sandwich bread, cold cuts, small pies, chicken croquettes, little pastries, sweet pie from the bakery, and a white cake with meringue frosting and cherries on top. Miss Linda helped with the details. She brought simple flowers to put in glass bottles, borrowed lace tablecloth, and that practical way of hers of organizing everything without fuss. When we arrived, the hall was already all arranged, beautiful. The lights on, the cake right in the middle of the table, that sweet smell of soda mixed with cheap perfume and joy in the air. We toasted with regular glass cups, full of Coke and a sip of cheap wine, just to say we had it. They took pictures of us and everyone who was there, and also at the church. Each click was a memory, and I didn't even really know where to look from so much emotion I felt that day. We turned on the radio, a slow song, one of those romantic international ones that played all the time back then. He pulled me to dance, spun me slowly, and I felt as if the whole world had stopped to look just at us. It was a small party, but full of warmth. Nothing fancy, nothing exaggerated, just truth, friendship, and love spread in every gesture. In the first years, living in that apartment that came with Philip's job at the health center, we lived well. We had no luxury, no trip to the beach every year, no imported car, but we had comfort, we had dignity. We ate well. When we felt like it, we'd go to a restaurant. Simple restaurant, neighborhood. But it was nice to go out to eat, not have to cook, sit at a table with a tablecloth, be served. Philip liked to take me to the movies. It was downtown, showed American films. We'd go Saturday afternoon, buy popcorn, soda, sit in the comfortable seat, watch the movie holding hands. I loved it. I had never been to a movie theater before meeting him. Sunday we'd walk, go to the park, take lunch, sit on the grass talking, watching the movement. Sometimes we'd go to the zoo to see the animals. Sometimes we'd just walk around the city getting to know new places. Life was good. It was simple. But it was good. We managed to save money, not much, because we also spent, lived, had fun, but we saved a little every month. We kept it in a savings account Philip opened at the bank. The idea was to one day buy our own house, our house, with a deed that no one could take away. 2 years after the wedding, we managed to rent a little house. The apartment that came with the job was too small, and we wanted more space. I wanted a yard, I wanted a dog. We rented a house in a good neighborhood. Little house with 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, bathroom, yard with a tree. The rent fit in the budget. I planted some things in the yard, tomatoes, kale, herbs, more for pleasure than necessity. I picked up a stray mutt. He was already an adult, apparently. I didn't know how old he was, but he liked us. We called him Duke. Philip was the one who suggested the name. I found it funny and started joking, saying he was a fancy dog who even had a royal name. He wagged his tail all proud, as if he understood. He was smart, affectionate, and jealous, that's all. Every day he'd accompany Philip to the gate and then come lie down in the kitchen right near the stove, as if he were my personal guard. Sometimes I swore he understood every word we said, the way he'd turn his head and keep looking at me seriously. He became part of the house, the routine, our life. He slept in the yard, but came in and out when he wanted. Master of the place. It was in this house that I got pregnant. I had just turned 29. My period was 2 weeks late. I started having nausea in the morning. My breasts became sore, swollen. I told Philip. He examined me right there at home, felt my belly, asked questions about the symptoms, calculated the dates. He said he was almost sure, but that he'd order a blood test to confirm. He took me to the center where he worked, collected the blood, sent it to the lab. The result took 3 days. When it arrived, Philip came to tell me with that wide smile on his face, positive. I was pregnant. I was happy and terrified at the same time. Happy because I was going to be a mother, going to have my own child, a real family, but terrified because I remembered my mother-in-law's words, that cruel letter, genetic defect, shouldn't have children. What if my baby was born albino? What if they suffered everything I suffered? What if children threw stones at them too? What if they grew up rejected, alone, unhappy? Philip noticed my fear, sat with me on the bed, held my hands, explained patiently. He said albinism was recessive, that it needed 2 genes, one from the father and one from the mother, that he wasn't a carrier at least, based on his entire family history. There was no trace of it, making the chances very low, almost impossible. And even if the baby was born albino, they'd be loved. They'd grow up in a family that accepted them, that protected them, wouldn't suffer what I suffered. That calmed me a little. But the fear continued there, small, deep in my chest. The first months were difficult. Nausea every day, especially in the morning. I couldn't eat almost anything. The smell of coffee made me nauseous, the smell of fried meat too. I lost weight in the first 3 months instead of gaining. Philip was worried. He forced me to eat crackers, drink juice, anything so I wouldn't get sick. After the 3rd month, the nausea passed. My belly started to grow. I'd look in the mirror, seeing that small volume growing slowly. I'd put my hand, feel the skin stretching. It was strange and wonderful at the same time. There was a life growing inside me, a life Philip and I made. I continued working at the hospital. There was no way to stop. We needed my salary. We needed to save some money for when the baby arrived. I no longer earned as little as before. Because of time on the job, my salary had increased. There they had a system. Each year, the employee went up a little. In the end, I already earned almost 5 times more than when I started, and that made a difference in our budget. My husband didn't want me to work anymore, especially after I got pregnant. But I was stubborn, and he, whether he wanted to or not, ended up doing everything I wanted. Even so, the routine was hard. I'd wake up while it was still dark, prepare coffee, and leave with the cold wind hitting my face. I'd take 2 buses to St. Luke's Hospital, always crowded, always with people pushing. I'd arrive tired, but I didn't complain. It was honest work, and I was proud to be there. I'd clean corridors, change sheets, disinfect entire rooms with that strong smell of alcohol and disinfectant that stuck in my hair and clothes. Sometimes the baby would move slightly and I'd stop for a second, put my hand on my belly, and smile alone. One of the conversations we had during the pregnancy was about the baby's name. The problem is, we didn't know if it would be a boy or girl. Back then, there was no way to find out before. So, we needed to choose two names. Philip wanted to honor his father anyway. If it was a boy, he wanted to name him Eric. If it was a girl, he wanted to name her after his paternal grandmother, Ingrid. I explained to Philip that here in America, it would be a massacre. Children would make fun of the name, teachers would get it wrong, everyone would say it wrong. Our child would suffer just because of the name. Philip was sad. He said he understood, but that he really wanted the baby to carry something from his family, from his father and grandmother, whom he had loved so much. We stayed like that for weeks. I'd suggest American names. If it was a boy, Peter, John, Luke. If it was a girl, Mary, Anna, Rose. Philip thought they were nice but said there was nothing Norwegian. Until I had an idea. What if we chose names that existed in both countries? Names that worked in Norwegian and English? We started looking. For a boy, we found Liam. In Norwegian, it was also Liam. It worked in both places, we decided. Liam Eric Bergman. Liam to use day to day, Eric in the middle as a tribute to Grandpa. For a girl, it was harder. Ingrid didn't have an English version, but Claire is simpler. Pretty, classic, strong. We decided. Claire Bergman. We were satisfied. Whichever it was, boy or girl, would have a name that worked here, but carried the memory of his family. It was a mix of both cultures, both worlds. In the 8th month, the supervisor called me into her office. She said I could stop if I wanted, and I wanted, of course. I had been dreaming of rest for a long time. My body was heavy, my legs swelled at the end of the day, and the false contractions came more and more frequently, those that make you hold your breath and think the time has come. I tried to pretend I was used to it, but the truth is each twinge gave me terrible fear. That expectation at the end of pregnancy is a mixture only those who go through it understand. Anxiety, curiosity, joy, and terror all together. Your heart seems to live beating outside your chest. Even more for a first-time mother who doesn't know what real pain is or what a false alarm is. Labor started one March morning. I woke up with pain in my belly. My water broke in the middle of the living room, wetting everything. Philip took me running to the hospital, where he worked doing on-call shifts, because to pay for the used car we bought, we needed more money. So, he started working there. We arrived at the emergency room. Philip took me straight to the delivery room. His colleague, Dr. Evans, was on duty and took charge. Philip stayed right by my head, in his street clothes, holding my hand. He wasn't in doctor mode. He was in husband mode, and I could see the fear and tension in his eyes. The pain became unbearable. It came in waves, squeezed everything inside, left me breathless. I screamed, cried, wanted to give up. Philip held my hand tight, kissed my forehead, said I was strong, that I would make it. I saw the struggle on his face. He wanted to do something, but he knew his place was with me. The nurse stayed alert, monitoring everything. The hours passed. 3 hours, 4 hours, contractions getting stronger and stronger. Dr. Evans checked the dilation, spoke calmly to the nurse, and when he looked at me, his voice was reassuring. Finally, he said it was crowning, that I needed to push. I felt the baby descending, tearing everything. I screamed loud, pushed with everything I had, and then I heard the cry. Loud cry, strong, of a baby with good lungs. I looked down. Dr. Evans was holding the baby. He smiled at Philip and said, "Congratulations, Dad." The skin was light tan, pink, dirty with blood, but tan. The hair was black, wet, dark. It wasn't blonde, it wasn't white. That breath of relief, the deep-seated fear that she would pass on her curse, was finally lifted. In that moment, holding her son, Miranda wasn't just a mother. She was the founder of a new family, free from the shadows of the past. Philip started crying. He cried and smiled at the same time. his face next to mine. The nurse was also crying. Everyone in the room was emotional. The nurse cut the umbilical cord, cleaned the baby, and brought him to me, placing him in my arms. Philip looked into my eyes and said with a choked voice, "It's a boy. It's Liam. Our Liam." I held that warm little baby who cried loudly. I looked at his eyes. They were still kind of closed, but you could see. They were blue, very light. While Dr. Evans took care of me, helping my body release the placenta, checking if everything was okay, Philip sat on the edge of the bed. He hugged both of us. There were the three of us crying and laughing at the same time. I left work at the hospital after Liam was born. I couldn't stand leaving that tiny thing at home. When the boy had just turned 1, he walked holding on to things, fell, got up, laughed in that way only small children know how to laugh. I was 5 months pregnant with the second child. My belly already showed round under my dress. It was Thursday night when the phone rang. We already had a phone at home by then, a rare thing, but Philip insisted because he was a doctor and sometimes they needed to talk to him urgently. I was in the kitchen warming milk porridge for Liam when I heard Philip's voice changing. It got louder, then lower, then trembling. He spoke Norwegian. I went to the door and stood there watching. Philip was with his back turned, holding the phone with both hands, bent forward, as if the voice on the other side weighed. He spoke words I recognized by sound, but didn't understand the complete meaning. That beautiful Norwegian I loved hearing, but now it came loaded with emotion, with pain. He started crying, "Dear." I felt my chest tighten. He stayed on the phone a long time, half an hour, maybe more. When he hung up, he stood with his back to me. His shoulders went up and down. I approached slowly, put my hand on his back. Philip turned and hugged me tight, his face buried in my neck. He was trembling. He spoke quietly, still in Norwegian, then corrected himself and switched to English. His mother had called, asked for forgiveness. She cried a lot on the phone. She said she was wrong, that she was afraid of losing her son, that she couldn't stand living without him anymore. She had discovered she had a grandson, Liam. She asked the boy's name, and when Philip said Liam, she repeated it slowly, trying to memorize it with that Norwegian accent. She wanted to meet the boy, wanted him to grow up there nearby, in Norway, with the family. She said she didn't even ask if he was albino. That didn't matter anymore. She was going to leave money in the bank for tickets for all of us. She begged Philip to return. You see, even the hardest of hearts can melt. Perhaps it was the fear of losing her son, or perhaps regret. But I believe it was the longing to be a grandmother. A grandchild has a power to heal wounds that you yourself have caused. I heard everything quietly, my heart beating fast. I felt fear, but I didn't let it show much. Philip pulled his face away, looked at me with red, swollen eyes, said he wanted to go, that he missed his family, his land, the language, the smell of things he had known since he was a boy, that he wanted the children to meet their grandmother, uncles, cousins, that he wanted me to know where he came from. I looked at my belly, at Liam playing on the sofa, at Philip. I took a deep breath and said quietly that it was okay, that we'd go together, that family was this, going where you needed to go. Even with fear squeezing my chest, I knew he needed this. The news spread quickly among the people who mattered. Sister Margaret cried, hugged me tight, and said she'd pray every day, that she'd send letters, that I had to write telling about everything. Miss Linda was quiet when she heard, her eyes watery, but agreed to keep Duke. The dog was already old. There was no way to take him. I hugged each one for a long time. I thanked them for everything they had done for me. I said I'd never forget that they had truly saved my life, and they really had, dear. Without them, I don't know where I'd be today. At the bank, the money appeared deposited just right, as Philip's mother had promised. Tickets for 3 people, one-way ticket scheduled. Philip took care of everything, documents, suitcases, paperwork. I just watched with my hand on my belly, Liam on my lap. That to me seemed like a dream. Me going to travel to Norway. Was it real? The plane left the airport one morning with a clear sky. I had never flown in my life. I squeezed Philip's hand at takeoff, felt my stomach turn, looked out the window and saw the world get small below. The flight had a layover, took more than 15 hours total. When we arrived in Norway, it was already another day, another light, another world. What tiredness, dear, what suffocation. Liam slept on my lap almost the entire trip, but when he woke up, he wanted to get down from my lap. He didn't even walk properly, but he was restless, agitated, and people all looking with ugly faces. When we got off the plane, the cold hit my face like a wave, a clean, cutting cold that came from all sides at once, from the ground, from the air, from the airport glass walls. It was early April, and Philip said spring was coming, but to me that was still winter. The wind came through the thick coat he had bought for me before the trip and seemed to pierce to the bone. Liam cried as soon as the icy air touched his skin. I pressed the boy against my chest, covered his little head with the wool blanket, and firmly set my step, trying to keep up with the pace of everyone who walked fast, without talking loud, without looking to the sides. Outside, everything was different. The thin, tall trees were still kind of bare, just some little twigs with new leaves on the tips. Some cherry trees already had flowers, and the wind spread pink petals on the wet ground. The air smelled of recent rain, of metal and wet earth. The sky was a silvery gray I had never seen. It didn't even look like a real sky. It looked like cloth stretched over the world. People walked fast, with firm steps, without looking anyone in the eyes. Everything was too organized, too clean, too silent. In America there was noise, people talking loud, horns, music coming from houses. There the silence weighed. Even Liam was quiet on my lap, feeling that different climate. Philip took us to a big taxi, black, that shone even with the gray sky. The driver was a gray-mustached gentleman who greeted Philip in Norwegian. He looked at me and Liam with a curious face, but said nothing. He put the suitcases in the trunk carefully, as if they were eggs. Inside, the car smelled of leather and old cigarettes. The road was smooth, no potholes. On each side were houses with pointed roofs, red or brown, all tidy as if they were toys. Small gardens in front, with flowers organized in rows. No high walls, no bars. People trusted each other, Philip explained to me. That was so strange to me it almost didn't seem real. We arrived at a 2-story house, with white walls and dark wood beams on the outside. It had a small porch, full of pots with red geraniums. The little wooden gate creaked when Philip opened it. My heart beat so hard I thought it would come out of my mouth. The door opened before we even got there. A short lady, white hair pulled back in a bun, floral apron over her navy blue dress, appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were just like Philip's, that light blue that looks like ice. When she saw her son, she raised her hands to her face and started crying. Philip dropped the suitcases right there on the wet ground and ran. He hugged his mother tight, and the two stayed there swaying from side to side, speaking in Norwegian, crying, laughing. I stood there with Liam on my lap, my belly weighing, not really knowing what to do. I looked around and saw more people coming out of the house. A tall gentleman, with thick glasses and suspenders. 2 younger women, similar to Philip in facial features. A skinny boy, with blonde hair, almost white. Philip's mother let go of the hug and came to me. She had red, swollen eyes, extended her trembling hands, and touched my face delicately, as if I would break. She said something in Norwegian I didn't understand, but from the affectionate way, the low tone, I realized it was good. Then she looked at Liam, who stared at me with those little black eyes, scared, clinging to my neck. She asked permission with a gesture, stretched out her arms. I let her take the boy, even with my heart tight with fear. Liam shrank all up at first, but Grandma started making funny little noises, rocking him gently, and the boy gave a little laugh. That melted everything, dear. I saw the woman crying and smiling at the same time, kissing her grandson's little head, repeating the name Liam with that funny accent that came out. Liam. Philip's uncle greeted me with a firm, formal handshake. The sisters hugged me quickly, kind of awkwardly. The younger brother just waved from afar. I realized right away I was being measured, evaluated. We entered the house. The floor was light wood that creaked quietly with each step. It smelled of furniture wax, warm bread, something sweet baking. The living room had heavy, dark, old furniture, brown leather sofa, bookshelf full of books, thick burgundy velvet curtains on the windows. On the wall, a large wall clock, loud tick-tock marking time, old portraits in silver picture frames. Everything very tidy, everything in its right place. They indicated for me to sit on the sofa. Philip's mother brought a tray with fine porcelain cups, teapot, little plates with golden cookies, dusted with sugar. She served the tea carefully, afraid of spilling, of breaking something. The tea was strong, bitter, different. The cookies were hard, but melted in your mouth, leaving a taste of butter and vanilla. Philip translated some things, but not everything. The whole family talked at the same time, too fast. They asked questions I didn't understand. He tried to summarize. They wanted to know about America, about the life we had, about how Liam was, if I was feeling well with the pregnancy. I answered what I could, smiling, nodding, trying to seem nice. The house was cold inside, even with those strange iron heaters attached to the walls. There was a draft coming under the doors. I asked permission to get another coat from the suitcase, and Philip's older sister, Catherine, took me upstairs. The room they had prepared for us was large, with a tall double bed, covered with a thick down comforter. There was a dark wood crib against the wall, already arranged with a clean white sheet waiting for Liam. The windows faced the street, and through the lace curtains I saw the neighboring houses, all identical, all tidy. Catherine tried to talk to me in English. She knew a few loose words Philip had taught by letter. "Welcome," she said with a heavy accent and smiled. I touched her arm in thanks. She understood. That night they made a big dinner. The table was set with a starched white tablecloth, porcelain dishes with blue flower designs on the edges, heavy silverware. There were lit candles in the center. Philip's mother brought a huge platter of roast meat. It smelled of garlic and wine. There were boiled potatoes shining with butter, braised red cabbage that released a strong, sour smell, dark, dense breads that we cut in thick slices. The meat was tender, juicy, seasoned in a way I had never tasted. The cabbage was sweet and sour at the same time, weird but good. They ate slowly, chewed properly, wiped their mouths with a napkin after each fork. No one spoke with their mouth full. No one put their elbows on the table. Everything had rules, a right way to do it. After dinner, Philip's mother brought an apple pie, still warm, dusted with sugar and cinnamon. The crust was crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. The apples melted in your mouth. They served it with freshly whipped cream. I ate 2 slices, pregnant as I was with that lion's hunger. Philip started working at the city hospital, which was about 20 minutes away by car. His uncle had arranged everything, used his contacts. It was a large, modern hospital with equipment that didn't even exist in America. Philip would tell me about the surgeries, the cases, excited in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. He was home. He was in his place. I stayed at the house with his mother and Catherine during the day. The sister was separated from her husband. No children. They tried to teach me Norwegian, pointed to objects and said the names slowly. Board, table, stole, chair, bread. I'd repeat, forget, repeat again. Liam started understanding Norwegian before me. Children learn too fast, dear. The food was plentiful, heavy. In the morning there were varied breads, homemade jams, yellow and white cheeses, very thinly sliced ham, hard-boiled eggs cut in half, strong coffee served in small cups. At lunch there was always meat, potatoes some way, cooked vegetables, thick sauce. In the afternoon, cake and tea. At night, bread with cold cuts or creamy soup with sausage. I gained weight fast. My belly grew. The baby moved strongly. The second child was born in August, in a clean white hospital, silent, that even made you ashamed to scream. It smelled of disinfectant and lavender. It was a girl. We named her Claire, as we had already agreed, which worked in English and Norwegian. Philip's mother cried when she saw her granddaughter. The girl wasn't albino. She had Liam's skin, but her hair was blonde and her eyes light blue. A son, and now a daughter. A new life, in a new land, surrounded by a family that finally embraced her. Miranda's long, painful journey from the shadows was finally complete. We lived at his mother's house the first months. Then, Philip used the inheritance money his father had saved for him all those years and bought a house for us. A beautiful, spacious house, closer to the hospital. It was really ours, deed in his name and everything. It had central heating, hot water without having to heat it on the stove, a washing machine that spun by itself. I didn't have to wash anything by hand. What a marvel. It had a big refrigerator that didn't defrost, a beautiful stove that worked just by turning the knob. The streets were too clean. There was no trash on the ground. No one threw anything out the window. Neighbors greeted with their heads, but didn't stop to talk. There wasn't that closeness there was in America, that entering each other's houses without warning, that having coffee together on the porch. Each one stayed in their square, as they say in America. I missed my Duke so much, poor thing. How I missed my companion. I cried so many times when I remembered him. I'm sure he must have suffered too. What I knew was that Philip was happy. I saw it in his eyes, in the way he walked lighter, in the smile that came easier. The family had received him with open arms, had truly apologized. His mother lived at our house helping with the children, cooking, taking care. Liam called her Oma, grandmother in Norwegian, and she melted completely. Gradually, I got used to it. I learned to cook their foods, learned to make that apple pie everyone loved. I learned to walk in the cold without complaining, to wear 3 shirts at the same time, to like snow when it started falling in November. I learned to understand Norwegian, at least the basics, enough to talk to people at the market, at the bakery, at the children's playground. It was very difficult, I won't deny it. But today I speak fluently. I speak fast, like them. Thank God we had money for everything, my dear. Philip earned well, very well. The salary came in Norwegian kroner, colorful and firm bills that I kept in an envelope inside the drawer, just to look at from time to time and remember that it was real. I had never seen so much money together in my life. We could buy what we wanted. The boys' clothes came from the good stores downtown, those that smelled of new fabric and had mannequins in the window with scarves wrapped around their necks and leather boots lined up underneath. The coats were thick, wool, the buttons heavy, the lining soft. They lasted years. We had our own car, a dark blue Volvo with the steering wheel on the left side and the seat that made noise when I adjusted it. Philip would wash it every Saturday morning, with the hose running and the children running around, throwing foam on the clean sidewalks. I'd stay at the window watching that scene that looked like a television commercial. The proud father, the shining car, the smell of soap and gasoline mixed with the cold air. During vacations we'd travel, take the train, and that for me was a show in itself. The huge windows, the metallic sound gliding on the tracks, the fields passing by quickly, full of cows and windmills. We got to know entire cities like that, one more beautiful than the other. We went to stone castles with tall towers and red carpets in the corridors, museums full of old paintings and wall clocks that seemed to breathe, and mountains covered with snow where the silence of the white seemed to swallow the world. I'd look at all that and think that their money had another weight, another smell, another way of existing. There, each krone seemed to yield double, and everything we bought lasted years. Today, dear, Philip and I are still together. Him at 77 years old, me at 70. We still live here in Norway, in that same house he bought so many years ago. Philip retired a long time ago, but he's still stubborn. He keeps reading those medical books, discussing cases with the younger doctors who come to visit. He says he doesn't miss the hospital, but I know he does. His gaze still shines when the subject is patient, diagnosis, cure. Liam lives in Oslo. He's 40 years old, tall like his father. He's an engineer, married a blonde Norwegian girl. Nice. They gave me 3 beautiful grandchildren who are already big, teenagers. Claire stayed closer and lives right here in the city. She's a homemaker, a real lady. She married a wealthy man, one of those elegant ones, in a suit and expensive watch, who speaks softly and opens the car door for her. The 2 gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren who speaks some words in English and Norwegian mixed. And dear, it's the sweetest thing in the world to hear. I sent money to Miss Linda whenever I could in the first years. I'd also call from time to time on that phone at the little store that was nearby. We'd talk a little. I'd ask about Duke, she'd ask about the boys. Until one day, about 10 years after we left, a neighbor answered the phone. She gave me the news that Miss Linda had been found dead inside her house. Alone, poor thing. My chest tightened so much I couldn't breathe. I cried for days in a row. Miss Linda. She was not an easy woman to love, but she was the only family I had in Louisville. When I heard she had died, all alone, it pained me so. I just hoped she knew, somewhere on the other side of the world, that someone was truly grateful for her. I owed her more than just a roof over my head. I tried for years to find Aunt Rachel, too. I wrote letters to her old address, hoping her husband or her son might still be there. I even asked Philip if we could hire someone to look for her. But the letters all came back, return to sender. And after Sister Margaret vanished from the hospital, I had to accept a painful truth. Some angels are only meant to be in your life for a season. They appear, they light the path, they save you, and then they are gone. I never got to thank them, not properly, but I have lived my life in a way I hope would make them proud. I have tried to pass on the kindness they showed me, the kindness that proved to me I was worth saving. Sister Margaret left the hospital. She must have retired, because when I tried to call there looking for her, they said she no longer worked there. I never got news of her again. I wrote letters too, but never got a response. No one knew where she was. I never went back to America. And to tell the truth, I don't even want to go back. I'm fine here. I'm happy. Sometimes I think I was born twice, once there to suffer and learn, and once here to truly live. And I'll tell you one thing, it was worth remembering everything. Every pain, every choice, every miracle that brought me to this paradise I now call home, brought me to a life I never imagined having. Life teaches us in a strange way, doesn't it? Sometimes it takes everything away to later return it double. Sometimes it hurts to later heal. My story is proof that no matter how dark the beginning, it does not define your end. The world may tell you that you are cursed, that you are broken, or that you are not worthy of love. But your worth is not decided by the people who cannot see it. It is forged in the silence, in the endurance, and in the small, brave choice to get up one more day. I went from being a girl hidden in the shadows to a woman living in the light. Thank you for sitting with me and listening to my story. The story it took me 70 years to tell. If my journey has touched your heart, please leave a like on this video and share it with someone who might need to hear a message of hope. And please subscribe to our channel for more stories that prove the strength of the human spirit. What part of my story resonated with you the most? Let me know in the comments below. May God bless you and your family in whatever part of